Closed captioning for Justice and Law Weekly is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices in support of quality public television for the Chicago area.
Welcome to a special edition of the Chicago Bar Association's Justice and Law Weekly. I'm Aurora Balastriaco, president of the Chicago Bar Association. This is part 2 of a 2-part program focusing on truancy, envisioned by the CBA Interfaith Committee, chaired by Judge Thomas Hogan. Our panel includes Judge Joan Beyer, who is a family court judge in Jefferson County Circuit Court in Louisville, Kentucky. She's the former president of the National Truancy Prevention Association and has lectured extensively on truancy alternatives, such as the Jefferson County Truancy Court Diversion Project. Dr. Gretchen Cusick is the research director at the University of Chicago Crime Lab and the Urban Education Lab. Her research focuses on youth and the juvenile justice system. David Jackson is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter with the Chicago Tribune and has written extensively about truancy. His truancy articles recently earned the Freedom of Information Medal from investigative reporters and editors. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, there are some especially vulnerable groups of children, such as the homeless and children with disabilities. Can you talk about bullying and disabilities can be a cause for truancy?
Well, it's certainly true that in the elementary grades, children with disabilities are disproportionately absent from school. There are about 240,000, 250 to 270,000 elementary grade kids in the Chicago Public School, and tens of thousands are classified as having a disability. Usually we think of a disability as being a physical impairment that requires a wheelchair or something like that. But actually the vast majority of kids classified with disabilities have learning and cognitive and emotional disabilities. And they have shockingly high rates of non-attendance at school. For example, kids with an emotional disability are on average absent from school in the elementary grades for 4 weeks and have 10 times the rates of suspensions as their non-disabled peers. Bullying itself is impossible to untangle from the statistics that are available. We only have anecdotal stories from these kids and their families about why they're not attending. But clearly these are kids who are falling behind in school and for whom that source of humiliation can be a compounding factor in making school a frightening or a uncomfortable place to be.
Now, in one of the articles that you actually covered, and that's truancy in Galesburg, Illinois, a city of 32,000 population. In Galesburg, there are truancy officers, and they are permitted to issue $75 tickets to the offenders. This seems to have a positive effect. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, what we found in Illinois in going around to many, many counties and school districts is that growing numbers of school districts are turning to this kind of intervention. A municipal fine, much like a traffic ticket, will be issued to the parent when a very young child is not in school for a certain number of days, say 3 days without a doctor's excuse or any excuse at all. There is a very strong body of thought that says you don't want to issue any kind of penalty to an already disadvantaged family because they don't have the means even to pay a $75 ticket. But what we found in our reporting is that in fact when we talked to a lot of families who've gotten these tickets and looked at records in the places where they're issued, is that almost invariably the school districts allow the families to work off the fine through attendance, and that does seem to be effective. We looked at families that are getting fined and tracked the results and what happened afterwards in dozens of cases where we were able to do that. And we found that indeed only a small number of those families kept chronically not attending, but often the fine was a step that really became kind of an eye-opener. Essentially, it showed that somebody's watching, that the school district knows that somebody cares, that somebody's going there, and as simple as it sounds, even that kind of a contact can have an enormous effect on a family that's very detached from the school.
Great. Now let's talk about some other legal remedies to truancy. Judge Beyer, in 2011 articles about truancy appearing in the Courier Journal, which is the paper in Kentucky, it stated that Kentucky judges were jailing youths for truancy at one of the highest rates in the nation. Only Washington State is higher. Has this method worked, and if not, why not?
Well, unfortunate numbers and an unfortunate reflection on a state where judges in general care about the youth that come before them. Jefferson County, which is Louisville, which has over 100,000 students in their school district, we do not incarcerate any students out of our family courts. However, I think judges, not just in Kentucky, but around the nation, are frustrated and stymied about what to do as to how to help kids and make them go to school. And unfortunately, judges who issue orders that say go to school and the child doesn't, if you don't look past the behavior, if you don't understand what underlies the decision of how that child is, why that child is not getting to school or not being successful academically, you can incarcerate them, but the truth of the matter is they're more likely to drop out after incarceration. The truth of the matter is that they may not be segregated from a general juvenile population, which means they'll be in there with kids that have committed murders, committed drug offensive, committed assaultive behavior. And so I like to say you're now introducing kids that have not committed a crime, but now have a whole new set of friends to learn from in terms of criminal behavior.
Yeah. Now, we have a clip about the Jefferson County Truancy Court Division project. Let's take a look at that video.
The first thing that happens is we look for a family where there's been a history of absences. We look for a family that doesn't have any other community support system.
It is a diversion program for the kids, and I think it also is an eye-opener to the parents, and I think it's really effective in getting the parents more involved.
We're offering them a simple way out of a bigger problem, but sometimes they don't see it that way.
You're actually selling this program to people who don't want it and think they don't need it.
When you come to the home of a 25-year-old mother of 3, the first thing they're going to think of is that you're telling them they're doing something wrong, and that's the absolute worst thing you can do, because then they're going to shut the door.
When I first was in the truancy program, I thought that it was like I was in trouble really bad.
On the initial visit, I befriend them, let them know that I'm there for them, I'm their advocate. I'm not there to turn them into protection and permanency because of educational neglect. You know, I let them know that I'm there for you, and whatever it is that you need me to do, just ask.
Then once we get the group and we have this initial agreement to participate, they go into the program that lasts about 12 weeks, where we will circle the wagons around them more or less to give them every support service and encouragement that we can find in whatever form it comes to remove the barriers for their child's attendance in school.
We met on Thursdays, and they talked to us about important things like words of the week, like self-integrity, perseverance, all those, and they made us feel safe, like we were at a safe place. That's probably the safest spot in the school at that time on Thursdays.
This is what is unique about this program across the country, is that this program occurs within the schools. The judges go in the schools. The families meet with you in the schools.
To make those good things happen, you have to want to come to school, and you have to want to learn. I mean, I try on every assignment and I complete it, and it just happens for you. It's a part you, a part God.
Judge Beyer, the Truancy Court Diversion Project seems to be really working. How many families are served with this project, and how costly is the project?
Well, this program began in 1997, so it's been up and running for a long time, and we started in one school. But it's expanded not just in our our county and our state, but it's expanded around the country. And this is what's so important for judges to understand, that we have the opportunity to reach in the community and try and find families and children before they're involved in the system, before things go terribly wrong, and try to bring community resources into the families, into the schools, be supportive of them, and look toward success and look toward hope. The program is free. When I say the program is free, everybody that works in the program, the teachers, the social workers, the mental health professionals, the judicial staff, we're already being paid. This program doesn't cost anymore. What costs are dinners and lunches and donuts, and if you feed them, they will come, and we believe in that, and we want to make it an environment, a family environment, that makes the family feel successful about that child.
Well, it's been around since 1997, so it sounds like it's really working well.
Well, it's an obligation that everybody in a position of authority that has the ability to do so, to reach out into the community and care for the most vulnerable population, those families and children that are not successful and maybe not feel welcome or hopeful in their school environment.
Right, right. The Chicago Bar Association's Interfaith Committee has been very focused on the truancy issue, and the committee actually established an anti-truancy pilot program. Let's watch this clip of the program unfolding at Benjamin Banneker Elementary School in Englewood.
Just like there are many reasons for truancy, there are likely many solutions. And there's not likely one magic solution.
We have to work as a team.
Well, this truancy program was birthed out of the vision of our leader of the Chicago Bar Association Interfaith Committee, that is the Honorable Judge Thomas Hogan.
The CBA truancy program has stepped in to help us with our students.
We'll start at week 1, which is today. This is our first week, but it actually goes, we deem, hopefully a minimum of 8 weeks and a maximum of 12 weeks.
What is your favorite place to be and why?
My favorite place is to be at my cousin's house.
It's a worthwhile effort, I think, to try to get our young people to understand the importance of education and the importance of actually being here. You have to be here to learn.
It just looked like it was something that would really make a difference in the lives of children.
The mentee meets their mentor, and after meeting the mentor will kind of find out from the student what their likes and dislikes are.
Yeah, it was pretty much a getting to know you session.
And afterwards, we avail ourselves to listen to them. We want to hear what their hearts are.
When I get to school, it's like I'm late every day. You're late, you got detention.
And as we actually talk to them about themselves, that's when we'll get the details of their situation, about what's going on, and how we can help.
I think our children are very open to and very susceptible to individuals coming in that cares about them.
A child gets inspired by knowing people care.
It's taking a chance. I see the individuals, the mentors coming in, and they're being consistent in ensuring that they're available to work with our children. It lets me know that it's important for us to work with programs such as the CBA truancy program, and to see someone working with my children, that they're smiling already. We're excited and we look forward to all the success that we'll have.
Dr. Cusick, clearly the CBA program is using the one-on-one mentoring. How important is mentoring to reducing truancy?
Well, mentoring, for one, mentoring can mean a lot of things. Mentoring, there are different types of mentoring programs, and mentoring can just mean having a positive adult in someone's life, which could be enormously helpful for youth with needs. How mentoring works to prevent truancy and what the components of mentoring programs are that work to prevent truancy is a question that we certainly need to answer. Are there certain components of the mentoring model that work better than others, that work for certain children better than others, is definitely a question. For example, there's a program that Chicago Public Schools is implementing now that we are evaluating to see if it does work and for whom it works, which is a much more structured mentoring program than other programs may have, and is focused on engaging students in school and keeping that focus on school critically important in these students' lives. And it's a structured mentoring model. It's one version of a mentoring program. There are certainly others, and we certainly need more research to determine what components of mentoring works and whether mentoring is something that can help prevent truancy.
Now, Mr. Jackson, in your story, Saving Alex, you visit LaSalle, Illinois, where the approach is to dispatch a truancy caseworker to the home of the truant. Can you tell us about that approach and what are the pros and cons? And are any government officials getting involved in this?
Sure. We followed around some really inspiring, salty figures as they got in their cars and drove through the poorest neighborhoods of towns across Illinois to find kids. One common thread, whether it's called mentoring or caseworker or truancy officer, through all the programs that we investigated in Illinois and across the country, is somebody who starts at the schoolhouse with the knowledge that a kid is not attending and then goes to that youth's house, knocks on the door, talks to the family, and tries to decipher the often complex reasons why this young person isn't attending, and then, if possible, tries to find ways to help the family overcome those barriers. In the case of Alex, who was a 12-year-old boy who had stopped attending school altogether, we watched over months, we sort of embedded with the family as the caseworker tried to work with him and coax him to school, and finally, failing a series of ever more stringent intervention attempts, finally did have to bring in the courts. And we followed as Alex and his family were brought into a juvenile court where a judge basically ordered Alex to attend school, or essentially sanctions could be imposed on his family because of his age. And we did see that work. We saw an enormous amount of involvement from very good-hearted and very wise and knowledgeable officials at all sorts of levels of the government, from that caseworker who time and time again came to the house and sat at the kitchen table and really opened her ears and eyes and listened, all the way up to the judge who, again, was doing what he was doing not to punish a troubled family, but to try to use the authority of the court to impose supervision and to bring resources into this family's life.
Now, are government officials involved? Are legislators coming up with alternative, programs?
Well, as a result of the stories being published, which kind of aired a lot of these questions and looked at potential solutions, there have been a number of efforts. There are bills in the General Assembly to lower Illinois' compulsory attendance age from 7 to 6 or 5. Basically, proponents of that philosophy feel that it'll give school authorities some kind of an ability to work with families that right now they can't really do anything with, because kids don't have to be in school until 2nd grade in Illinois. Also, the General Assembly is putting together a top-level task force that they hope will bring together various government agencies that might cooperate and to craft programs that will look at Chicago. But I have to say, very frankly, we're watching all of this and evaluating it, but I'm not yet seeing on the ground important changes that are lifting these young lives. And I've got to say, you listen to Dr. Cusick, you listen to what Judge Beyer is saying about essentially the crusade that she's been carrying out in Kentucky for years, and you really understand that this is a fight that can't be abandoned. It is complex, but it's not something that we as a society should say, well, it's a big oceanic complex problem and we'll throw up our hands and walk away. I do think that there are solutions. You do see them working here and there and elsewhere around the country, and I do think it does need a concerted effort, certainly in Chicago.
Right. Now, Judge Beyer, schools give out detention for tardiness and truancy, and it seems like the child is being punished for something that he or she does not have any control over. Isn't this unsettling to the child who is probably already overwhelmed with having to find or fend for themselves?
Well, you know, certainly I respect the rights and the needs of a school to keep the school environment orderly and controlled and safe. And depending on the age of the child, sometimes they do have control and are just making sometimes poor decisions. Oftentimes I'll have kids in my program that'll be out in the hall talking and be late into the class or at their lockers or so forth. I think that's the worst scenario, though, is schools that may suspend kids for being truant. And it happens. We have schools that won't give students make up homework if they have unexcused absences. Well, if you're suspending a child for being truant, really they've gotten to the place that you're essentially acquiescing to their position that they don't want to be in the school. And again, I think it's an approach of having the school understand why this child isn't getting into the building. In our program, we encourage teacher mentors. The doctor talked about mentors, community mentors, but we work on teachers basically adopting, if you would, students in the program. I had one little girl in the program that was bringing hot fries, 2 bags of those snacks to school every day for lunch. She had never had a salad in her life. The teacher who we hooked them up together, and she was her mentor every day, would say, well, I'm going to bring you lunch. She brought her a salad and a turkey sandwich. Is this a long-term life-changing event? It may be for this child. We don't know, because now that they have that connection. So our response is to respond to the behavior and not ask the question, why is this happening? And I think we need, as a society and as leaders in the community, to say to ourselves, wait a minute, this may be complex, it is overwhelming, the numbers are extraordinary, but it really is one child and one family at a time, and if we're not going to do the work, then who is?
Right. Now, Mr. Jackson, you write that when Chicago police file a school absentee report, a school official should be dispatched to the child's home, and that Illinois should lower the age from 7 to 5 years of age. How would these changes help?
Well, taking them one at a time, Chicago police do file a school absentee report. What we learned was that those reports aren't read or analyzed really by the school officials. They basically get boxed up and sent into storage. And we found a school report that said police bring the kids to the school and they simply go out the other door. So that kind of a cooperation and even just digitizing that information, I think advocates say could be a real big step. And then lowering the attendance age, it's been done recently in Colorado, it was done recently in Alabama, it's being done in states like that. They're not seeing a huge difference in the number of kids coming into school, but they are seeing it make a difference with the most disadvantaged kids.
Okay. Now, was that recently with those states that have changed?
Colorado was 2006 or 7, I believe, and Alabama was 2012.
Okay.
And we do know younger kids, this readiness for kindergarten, this ability to have your skill sets developed if they're not in the building, if they're not in school. When we've talked about this, we know that a child, if they can't read by 3rd grade, are unlikely to graduate from high school. And so really the burden of the work and the bulk of the work needs to happen at the front end, right, as opposed to expending extensive resources in terms of incarceration, juvenile detention, and so forth at the back end.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the front end is definitely where it needs to be, where we need to be. Now, Dr. Cusick, in the last clip, the young girl seemed so empowered by her ability to come to school and do her assignments. Mm-hmm. Are we doing anything to empower these young people to have more control over their lives?
Well, first, I think the we here, going back to one of the comments David made, is that in some ways that we do need to think about this beyond just the schools, that there are, as Judge Beyer knows, there are the court systems, there are many agencies that are involved in that we. But yes, certainly, I mean, we know from adolescent development that type of agency and feeling success can be can be very empowering. One of the things that the Check and Connect program that I mentioned does is really try to build the relationship between the mentor and the student to help that student really focus on developing, acquiring the skills to resolve conflict constructively, to look for solutions rather than to look for blame, to have the role of the mentor diminish and have that student become less dependent on the mentor and really become their own agent of their success in school, and really to, as we saw in this young woman, to empower them to be engaged in their own education and to see those successes. So that is one critical component of that particular model.
Right, and that was actually really great to see, with her smile and her feeling of success. Judge Beyer, one of the Courier Journal articles mentioned an alternative facility for truant youth called Phoenix House. How does it work, and is it effective?
Well, on occasion, unfortunately, for short periods of time, some judges choose to take children out of the home, and when we do so, we want to put them in a place where they're going to get counseling, where they're going to be transported and get to school every day, where there's going to be group counseling, where they start to develop a they keep, the more we can get them to keep doing the same thing by going to school every day, get into that habit, keep doing that, and also address underlying issues, whether they're academic issues or emotional issues. We find that there's been some success with that, and that cost, unfortunately, is the same cost as incarcerating a child, but it's done for very short periods of time.
Mr. Jackson, after being out in the community, do you have some advice for neighbors, other parents, teachers, about how they might be able to be supportive of a truant child if they find one in the community? You alluded to something earlier.
Sure, yeah, it's the reality that neighbors often do spot a child, and there are places, including Galesburg, Illinois, where they've made a concerted effort to let neighbors know that they should call a hotline number or something like that. It definitely does. It is the responsibility of neighbors to call the police or the schoolhouse and alert them. The Chicago Public Schools has a number, 773-553-4000. We found that they weren't checking calls to that number very often at all, and therefore it wasn't effective, and perhaps as a consequence nobody was calling that much. But I do think that the kids who are out of school, their families always know that that's wrong. And I think being, when they know that somebody's watching, I think it really changes behavior.
All right. Now, real quickly, we have 1 minute left. What last word would you like to say?
Well, I'd like to say what Mr. Jackson said, which is we can't give up. It's an enormous problem. We have to create a sense of urgency about it. It has to happen now, and we can't look the other way, because these children that we're looking the other way on are our future.
Great, thank you.
And if we want to make progress on this issue, which we have made little progress so far, is to really examine what is effective and what is cost effective in these, especially for districts with scarce resources.
I think the best single measure of our worth as a society is the life of a disadvantaged child, and I think that the devastating impact of non-attendance on school is enormously costly to all of us.
Great. Judge Beyer, Dr. Cusick, Mr. Jackson, thank you for educating us about positive ways to effectively address truancy in our schools. I'm Aurora Balastriaco. Thank you for joining me on the Chicago Bar Association's Justice and Law Weekly.
Closed captioning for Justice and Law Weekly is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices in support of quality public television for the Chicago area.